Hello, California, and welcome to this week's edition of Your Financial Compass, brought to you by the team of Bulman Wealth Group. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, and joining me in the studio, we have the founder, Chris Bulman, and financial advisor, Scott Bulman. We've got another great show for you this weekend. Thanks so much for being here with us. Chris, Scott, great to see you as always. How are you?
Good, and I have the right cup this time.
Nice.
Levi, our director, yelled at me last episode we filmed because I had a plastic or like a cardboard cup. Paper cup.
Ruined the whole show. It's
Ruined
like
the
those
whole
movies.
show.
You know what?
It's like those movies when, was it Game of Thrones, where there was a Starbucks
yeah.
Accidentally in there.
Where's the continuity director? We're messed up. So
it's all part of the process,
Yeah.
right? At least the financial advice was solid. So
as far
there's
as
that.
I understand it was, but
Yes,
at least
awesome.
mine was.
Well, the title of today's show is Don't Just Have a Portfolio, Have a Plan. Here's the reality. A lot of folks will come in and start the financial planning process, and what do, guys? They bring in their POS, right? Their pile of statements.
Oh, wow. Okay. I wasn't sure where you were headed with that one.
Thinking that is their retirement plan. But your financial accounts are accounts. They're not your plan. So we're going to dive deeply today into what it means to actually build an income plan for yourself in retirement and all that goes into it. And this is what you guys specialize in doing. This is what you do day in and day out.
Yeah, we use a POS reference. I usually use a different set of words for that. But yes, all jokes aside, a lot of times people come in, if we're meeting them for the first time, and they say, well, you know, what have you done? What is your plan up to this point? They'll throw down a bunch of statements.
Yep.
Well, here's my plan. That's like getting a bunch of wood, throwing it down, saying, here's my cabin. It's like, well, yeah, it's a big part of it, but
Right.
it's not a plan. And that's the thing. It's like, the good news is you have raw materials to work with, but where we run into issues is, okay, now what do we do with them?
Right.
And that's where the planning starts to come into play.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the bigger your pile of wood is, you know, for your cabin, the more statements you have and the more pieces you have, the more assets you have, the bigger your wealth is, the more we can actually help. So whether it's with respect to asset management or legacy planning or tax planning or healthcare planning, all of those things become a bigger piece of the pie the more assets you have. And so when people bring in, you know, really what I like to see, people come in with a smile and all their paperwork. And from there, we're going to piecemeal that into a comprehensive plan that really hopefully provides peace and removes some of the fear and uncertainty of the next 20, 30
What if
years.
they come in with a frown?
Then I send them to Scott's office.
Well played.
Oh, well, continuing with this cabin analogy, I think it's interesting. A lot of folks are very focused on their lump sum, right? Because you've been working so
Yeah.
hard, you've accumulated, you've saved up all this money. But success in retirement isn't so much to do with that lump sum, although obviously that does play a factor, but rather your ability to take that lump sum and turn it on into a reliable, ongoing, steady stream of income for yourself that's going to pay you for the rest of your life. That's the key.
That's right, and that's, I think, a lot of anxiety when folks are going to retire, thinking about retirement, is that transition. Because you're used to getting, if you're not a business owner, you've been used to be, you know, a company's been paying you for
Right, you've been
a
getting
number
that
of years.
consistent paycheck.
You don't have to worry about that. Your
Right.
job, pay your bills, but also just put money into your account. But you reach a point where the money in that account needs to be turned into that income you have to start paying yourself, and it can be anxiety riddled because it's like, well, how do I do that?
Right.
All I knew is how to save the money and create it. Now, how do I turn that into income? And it's like we have that accumulation phase of all those years of putting money into it. Then we get into the preservation phase and then going up the hill. Now, how do we get down the hill? Yeah.
And that's an important psychological shift, too.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's really hard for people who've done a really great job of saving to then switch gears almost overnight, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now I've got to pay myself from that money that I've saved and I have to start drawing from it. That can be really challenging.
It can, and I will say it's very individual as well. I mean, everyone is different. We have sometimes people come in with $4 or $5 million, and they will spend the same or less than they did while they were working, and you can't get them to spend their money. You know, join it if you play golf at, you know, at courses all the time. Why don't you join a club? You get to know people. No, we can't afford that. There's 5 million reasons that says maybe
Yes.
you can. You know,
Correct.
So at some point you have to really, as advisors, we have to get to know the clients, the prospective clients that come in, because everyone's different.
Yeah.
Some people come in, they go a little bit haywire at retirement. They're going to eat out more.
Right.
They're going to
Travel
spend
like
more,
crazy.
travel,
Yeah.
give money to the
They're trying
kids,
to do
give
all
money.
the things that they've been waiting to do.
All those things,
right?
which in that's what I want. I want
Yes.
people to live the life to its fullest.
Yes.
But so many people come to see us, and this is fine too, they don't spend any more money. Matter of fact, sometimes they spend less, and they like. No, I was in the service. I traveled all my life.
Yeah, I got it all.
Whatever I did, I traveled. I got it out of my system, or I just don't enjoy travel. No, we don't like to eat out. We like to eat at home. It's too expensive, and so everyone's a little bit different. But if you're not going to spend money and you have this big nest egg and it's going to continue growing, now we want to understand. Okay, how much income should you take then? Because your last paycheck was, $120,000 a year. Now in retirement, some people say, well, I want to make sure I get as much income as I did before.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
do you? You only spend 40. Why do you want 120 to pay taxes on it?
Yes.
And basically, you take it out of one pocket, pay taxes, put it back into the other.
Right.
What's the point of that? So we really want to understand where you sit. What are you looking to do? How can we help you? And if these are questions you've been thinking about, we're the people to talk to.
Absolutely. And I know that this is your joy. I've heard you say on the show before, you love telling folks what they can do in retirement, not what they can't do, right?
Yeah.
That's
Or what
it's-
they should do.
Right.
Yeah. That's up to them, right?
It's almost like
Right.
they need permission to go ahead and spend that money, especially I think that when folks don't have a solid plan in place, what I have seen is one of two things happens. Either they don't spend the money at all, right? And they are just like, they're so fearful, so then they don't enjoy it during those go-go years when you have the physical capability to go and travel and do those bucket list items. Or conversely, they just overspend and then they run into that threat of running out of money.
I met with some folks the other day, and they were very admirably saving a lot of money for their son. And they're like, we had a timeshare in Hawaii. We had to get rid of that. And I talked with them, and towards the end of the conversation, I was like, they have well over $3 million. I was like, guys, you can still do that. You can still do those things. You want to live your life, and this goes back to what Chris was saying. What you were saying is like, some of us were such a prisoner to, well, I'm going to run out. I'm going to run out. It's the number one fear every year of folks running out of money. But it's
Right.
like, that's where a plan can come in to map out where everything is going. Can we spend more? Hey, guess what? You either want to die with $10 million or that plan says you can probably spend more. You can go on those trips for the next 10, 15 years. And another thing I find misleading with some of these financial ads is people will come in and they'll have a certain amount of money set aside. And the ad says my retirement number needs to be $3 million.
Yes, what's your number, right?
Guys,
that was a huge ad.
like that factors in
Thing.
Social Security, that might factor in pension income, that might factor in inheritance. It doesn't need to be this big blob of money. That certainly helps, but I think folks have an extra anxiety because they see those ads and they're like, well, I'm way far behind. Those are just, these companies want you to save more with them. That's all it is. So I think those can be a bit misleading as well. It's like,
For
well, my retirement number, I'm way off. I can never retire.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of great financial advisors out there, financial planners, our peers. There's a lot that we talk to regularly, but sometimes there are some that just don't do the work. And we've had people come in. I can think of a few specific instances where they come in.
Can you name their name?
I can't name the names because we're not allowed to. Otherwise, I would. I would think they would love to hear their name on TV. So, but they come in and they say, I'm 70 years old and I just don't know if I can retire. My other advisor, before I saw you on TV, my other advisor said I can't retire. I keep working. Once we do the work and look at the plan, we look at him and say, why didn't you retire 3 years ago? Well, they told me I couldn't. When you do the homework, then we actually know if you can retire or not. So the homework has to be done. The homework is a comprehensive financial plan.
Yeah, and I think I'm so appreciative that you guys are talking about it because I think a lot of folks procrastinate and they don't engage in this process because they're afraid.
Yeah.
They're afraid, and they're afraid they're going to be judged, or they're afraid they're going to be told to be put on a strict budget. You're saying we want to give you permission to live the lifestyle and to be able to afford the lifestyle that you want to continue living. That's what it's about.
And there are some people that they probably should have anxiety because maybe they made poor financial choices and what have you. But the majority of folks that we meet with are on the other side of that coin where they've put it off and they're just like, well, I'm going to have to work forever. Time out. Let's look into that and see if that's the case. And I've told this story on the show before, but I love it. I have one of my favorite clients. She came in several years ago and she'd been a nurse for a long time. I'm going to have to work forever. And I said, well, let's look through it. Long story short, I said, you can retire. This was a Tuesday night. You can retire tomorrow if you want. She's like, well, now that I know I can retire, I'm going to work 2 more years. And if someone gets on my bad side, I'm going to leave. She worked like 6 more months. But that's where a plan comes into place because we put all the pieces together. And this might be you thinking you're going to have to work forever. Well, have you ever sat down to see how all the pieces fit together, from your investments to maybe a pension you have, Social Security, inheritance, rental income, taxes, inflation, rates of return? How does all of this fit together? Once we put all those things together, then we can find out, You're on track, you're not. You can retire tomorrow. Hey, maybe you have to work a couple more years, but wouldn't you rather find that out now than like the week you're retiring? That's where the planning comes in. It's not as scary as we're led to believe.
But also, to be blunt, sometimes there's Dave Ramsey's a radio, TV, YouTube host, and I heard him say one time, you should not see yourself inside of a restaurant again unless you work there. I mean, that's like, that's for someone who cannot afford to retire, but is making poor decisions, going out to eat, spending money where they shouldn't, things like that. So, there's two ends to the spectrum, and the more assets that you have, the more planning you're going to need. The less assets you have, you're going to need make some tough decisions and adjustments so that you can move over to the side where you can retire comfortably.
Right. Well, and this is why it's not a cookie cutter approach, and this is why you guys are so strategic in building customized, personalized plans for folks. So I'm excited for more folks to connect with you as a result of today's show. So if you're out there and you're going, you know what, I haven't thought about some of these things. Maybe you're already working with another financial advisor, but they're not having these kinds of conversations with you. It's time to get a second opinion. You owe it to yourself to have that written plan in place so that you can be confident that you can live the lifestyle you want in retirement. So if you would like to take advantage of this opportunity, it's completely complimentary to you. We invite you to receive your very own complimentary Compass Financial Review. You can claim yours by calling that number you see on the bottom of your screen, 888-970-4685. Now, if you'd rather not talk to someone right now, but you do have your smartphone handy, don't worry, we've got you covered. You can simply pull it out, open up that camera app, point, click, and scan that QR code that you see down there in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. That will take you over to a landing page, ask you a few short, simple questions, and then a member of the team from Bulman Wealth Group will reach out to connect with you to schedule your complimentary visit that way as well. When we come back, I'm going to be asking Chris and Scott to dive deeply into their income planning process. Stay with us.
From our advisor team to our service team, which is, I think, second to none. We invest a lot into that part of our office as well, because we want people to know, how we feel about them. But it all revolves around the idea that our clients are vitally important.
There's so many different financial advisors. There's so many folks that they can choose to work with. So one of the ways I feel like we differentiate ourselves is we want a relationship with our clients. And, I really learned that from Chris. Is there's so many dollars and cents and all this information to know, but at the end of the day, it's got to be a trust and a like, because we're partnering with somebody. So I want them to think a trip to see me is not a trip to the DMV or to the dentist, but it's just being able to share in the good times and be available to be a resource in the bad times too. So at the end of the day, just boiling it down to the relationship is really important to us.
Welcome back, California. You're watching Your Financial Compass, brought to you by the team of Bulman Wealth Group. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, here with both Chris Bulman and Scott Bulman. We are talking today all about building a solid income plan for your retirement. The reality is that having a portfolio is not the same thing as having a plan. And guys, I think what another issue for folks is it can be really overwhelming to think about building an income plan for 20, possibly easily 30 years in retirement. I mean, this is something that this generation is facing for the first time. It's not like our grandparents where, they retired at 62 and maybe passed away before the age of 70. We are living longer than we ever have before. How do you all go about the income planning process and really simplify it for your clients?
Yeah, we use a few different softwares and approaches to the way we do it, but in its simplest form, we look at it in three different buckets: safety, income, and growth. In safety, we want to have some money in a safe bucket that you have access to. It's fully liquid. It's probably not going to earn very much because it's fully liquid and you have access to it. It's in a bank or checking savings, short-term CDs, something like that, maybe getting 0 to 2 or 3%. That's money to pay your bills, to pay your lifestyle, etc., along with income. Your income bucket should be set up. And this isn't an income bucket for 30 years. This is an income bucket, maybe you want to visualize it in a 5-year increment or a 10-year increment. But if we know that you spend $10,000 a month, for example, let's just use that number, and Social Security is going to be between the two of you, maybe $5,000 a month, and you have a pension that's $2,000 a month, that's $7,000. So we're going to need another $3,000 a month at least, if we're not including taxes in this, $3,000 a month, that's $36,000 a year. And if we want to go out 10 years, we know we'll need $360,000, and we can even add inflation, call it $450,000. We need $450,000 in that bucket So we take out of your $2 million investments, you can visualize taking 450 of that. And now I'm putting into this bucket into some investment that cannot lose any money and you're going to take an income stream from that for the next 10 years. That allows you to put all the rest of your money outside of the bucket and the income bucket. Now we can put all this money into the growth bucket and we can build out a diversified portfolio of stocks, bonds, mutual funds, whatever we want to have in this bucket. But when you go to work tomorrow and you see the news that the stock market dropped or that China's going to invade Taiwan or Russia's going to invade Ukraine or
aliens.
Or aliens have landed or it actually is a flat earth. Whatever it might be that's going to drive the stock market down, now you don't have to worry because we know we have 10 years for the stock market to do what it's going to do, which is go up and down, but hopefully double over that time period. And our lifestyle will not be impacted by what happens on a day-to-day basis because we've built our lifestyle, our income stream in a safe way.
If we have our money, as Chris said, properly done in these buckets, think of a year like 2022 when the stock market was going down. A lot of people, they were trying to pull their income out of their growth bucket. The growth bucket's 5, 10 plus years from now. As Chris said, that's not one we're as worried about because we're not using the money yet. But where folks got into issues and it created more anxiety in a down market is they were pulling money from it to live off and it was losing money in the market. So it was like a boat leaking from both sides. So that's where money has its place. And part of that income bucket is rental income, Social Security, pensions. And then we're trying to fill in the gaps. You've got the bucket, as Chris said, but the growth bucket is, I know it still hurts when we see the money fluctuating, but it hurts less if we know that we're not going to be unable to pay our bills because if we plan properly, it's off on the side marinating.
Yeah, and I could give a perfect example of this is if you retired in the year 2020 or 2021 and we had set you up in our safety, income, growth sort of visual.
Right,
And now that's just the visual. We use a full financial plan, of course, but if we did that and then all of a sudden 2022 hits and the market drops 25%, bonds are down 20%, your lifestyle hasn't been impacted at all. Now your growth bucket has dropped maybe 15% or so, but your lifestyle isn't impacted at all. And guess what happened since then? The market's up 40%, your accounts are all back to where they were and above, and you never had to worry because we set you up on an income plan and a bucket strategy that works for you.
Right. That provides such peace of mind to know that your income is accounted for. So then anything in the growth it's almost a bonus, right? But to your point, then if there are those dips in the markets, you can stomach that market volatility because you're not depending on that bucket to produce the income you need to live off of.
They do these polls every year of retirees. Number 1 fear. Number 2 fear is always death. Number 3 fear is being on television. Number 1 fear is running out of money. And this is probably a lot of you at home. Maybe not everyone has this fear, but the majority of you probably do. And even if you were retired now, well, when inflation shot up, 22, 23, and coffee was 27% more than it was, you started to wonder, like, gosh, now I'm starting to wonder with all this inflation. The point is, we can begin to alleviate those fears if we sit down and map this out. If we can see it on paper in black and white. And here's another thing too we have not mentioned with planning. You don't just make the plan once and hope for the best. It's a living thing. We're changing it all the time. Things will come up. All my kids getting married, or I'm going to move out of state. We can run these different scenarios through the plan to see what kind of long-term economic impact it'll have. And if it's going to have a detrimental one, well, it might inform our decision, and maybe we won't do something if we're kind of on the fence about it. So planning, it's always a constant thing that we're manicuring. You don't just, because life changes. It's like traveling across the country in a GPS. You run into weather, you run into traffic, auto accidents, what have you. The plan does the same thing. It needs to adapt and change with us.
Yes, for sure. And I know this is another thing that I love about you guys so much and your entire team at Bulman Wealth Group. You are committed to doing life with your clients, walking through the good and the hard, right? And being able to make those adjustments as things come up because we know that that's inevitable in life. Things still happen in retirement. Just because you're not working anymore doesn't mean that you don't have sometimes emergency expenses or hard things that you then have to navigate and make adjustments for.
Absolutely, and we try to stay close with our clients. We are in touch with them weekly, really, whether it's through our blog, our newsletter, our emails, regular appointments, whether they're twice a year, 4 times a year, depending on kind of where clients fall and how often they want to meet. We do baseball games. We just did a game at the River Cats. It's our local semi-pro.
AAA, they're pro.
You're right.
Semi.
They are. I apologize.
He's not a baseball fan.
I apologize for that
Yeah,
one, Scott.
it was, yeah, anyhow.
I'll pray more later for that one. So for all of you AAA baseball players out there, you are professionals. I apologize. But we went to a game recently, and it rained cats and dogs.
Oh my gosh.
You cannot believe how much it rained. And everybody showed up. We had over 110 or some people. It was insane, and they were all so happy to be there.
Yeah.
And of course, my wife and I are worried, and Scott and Julie, and are people going to have a good time? Everyone had such a good time. We do dinners, we do quarterly financial breakfast. We want to stay in touch, stay in tune, even in the bad times. Even when the market is going down, we want people to know we're there, we're watching it, and just stay close with them.
Yeah, well, and this is why you were so committed to helping folks successfully navigate to and through their retirement. So if this is something that you are needing help with, maybe you're watching this going, you know what? I don't have a solid income plan in place. I don't have these 3 buckets of safety, income, and growth, but you want to explore what that could look like for you. This is why we offer the complimentary Financial Compass Review. To claim yours, simply call that number on the bottom of your screen, 888-970-4685, or again, you're welcome to scan that QR code and that will get you connected as well. More on this important subject of having not just a portfolio, but a plan right after this.
I became a financial advisor coming out of the tough times of the tech bubble in the late 90s, early 2000s. Moved to California, uprooted my life, changed everything, and then 9/11 happened the first week in this industry. I was prepared already to help people from tough times coming out of the tech bubble, but what we didn't expect is there were 3 years in a row when I started of the market dropping. That really impacted my whole career. It crafted and created how we manage money. We don't want our clients to ever lose like that, and so everything we do is built on the goal of our practice, and the people that we meet with is to remove the fear and uncertainty that we all face, and it goes back to those first years in the market.
I was a sportscaster on television. I grew up in Flint, Michigan. In TV, you bounce around, and went to Mississippi and worked at the NBC station there and covered, college football's big, NFL's big, all that stuff. And a guy I knew relatively well in a different state decided to get out of TV, and in this opportunity I always enjoyed finance and money, and it seemed really exciting. I like to communicate to folks and feel like I can communicate well. It was such a fresh, kind of different career than what I was used to that it was exciting.
We go into every meeting with no place to get. We're there to meet with you, to discover your needs, find out where you are at that point, and how we can help you build and craft that plan for the future.
Well, welcome back to Your Financial Compass. I'm Kristen Oakley here with Chris Bulman and Scott Bulman. We've been talking today about the importance of not just having a portfolio, but having a plan. All that goes into building a solid income plan for your retirement so that you can be confident that you can continue to live the lifestyle that you want to have. I'm curious, there's a question of timing here. I think I've heard different things through the years about when someone should actually start engaging in this income planning process. How do you answer that question for folks?
I'll take it with my kids. I start them early. All my kids, the youngest
Are
is
all working. Child labor laws are being broken.
They're 9, 11, 13, and 15 as of today, but they all know about what their net worth will be when they're 30 and 40 based on the amount that they have now, and the rule of 72 and compound interest, and they every day.
They're so blessed to have that knowledge.
And every day when I come home, they steal my phone, they point it at me so that it unlocks it, and then they look at their accounts and see how they're doing that day, and they just love it. So I don't think you can start too early if you're looking at building generational knowledge and wealth, and so if you're a grandparent watching this and you want your kids to get involved, it's not too soon to start.
Right.
As far as how Scott and I, we're not meeting with 11-year-olds or 15-year-olds. But we want you to start thinking of things in terms of a plan. You can start as soon as you start working. And I'll just give you a quick story on that. A young man came in, he was in his 20s, I think 29. He already had about $600,000 saved in his retirement. And I said, this is unique. We don't usually see people in their 20s with this much saved. How'd you do it? What happened? He said, well, I was just dumb enough to listen to my first boss. He said, when you start, you max out your 401k plan and learn how to live off the rest. I didn't know any different, so I just did that. And that builds wealth. Sometimes it's something that simple.
Right.
But I'll let Scott kind of take it. The people that we can help more are going to be pre-retirees, retirees, those with net worth, $500,000 or more, high income, things like that. we can really dig in and help solve your financial issues.
There's that old saying, I don't forget where it comes from. It says the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The next best time is today. And as Chris said, there's never a bad time unless you're going to retire or think you're going to retire in a few weeks, a few months, or a couple years. It's one of those things where, say we're starting at a younger age, 40s, 50s. Well, what we can begin, and we have a certain age in mind, like, I want to retire by 60. Well, if we start looking in our early 40s, we can see, are we on track as we map it out? It's like, hey, if you keep doing what you're doing, you're great. Or we can find out where there's a blind spot or where we're behind or what adjustments need to be made, and we can begin to find out, you're on track, but if we make this change, instead of 80% certainty, it's 100%. So that's where it helps for younger people. But with folks that are a little bit closer, it certainly helps too, because you don't want to get to that point and then you're planning, you're retiring, or think you're retiring in 6 months, and you're like, whoa, I'm way off. Like you don't have a budget, or you haven't saved enough, or you haven't factored in taxes, what have you. So I feel like you cannot realistically go into retirement without having mapped out. Again, I always use the GPS idea. If we're going to drive across the country, you're not just going to wing it.
Right.
I would imagine you're not going to. You're going to follow a map or a GPS, and you're going to chart the progress. These are the turns we need to make.
Right.
We need to do the same with our retirement if you think you're going to retire and stay retired.
And you have to know where you're starting from, and you also have to know where you're headed.
What is the destination?
Yeah.
And we have a big belief in protecting your family first. If you're in your working years, accumulation years, and you have younger children, a spouse, protect them first. Life insurance, legacy planning, trust, will, powers of attorney. That's the foundation. Start there. People, you can come in with me with $5 million. If you haven't covered those bases, that's where we're starting. Once we've protected your family, then we're going to find all those other, if you want to retire at 60, you're only 50. What happens if you die, next year? Is your spouse going to still be able to have a life, your kids? We want to look at all those things, speed bumps. What if you're disabled? Sometimes that can be worse than dying, because now you're still alive, we have to care for you, and there's not money set aside.
Right.
A plan helps us look and solve all those issues.
Absolutely, and prevent more problems from occurring, right, on the front end. Well, Chris, Scott, thank you both so much, and we thank you for joining us. Again, that number to call to start your process to getting a tailor-made plan for you is there on the bottom of your screen, 888-970-4685, or again, you're welcome to scan that QR code, and that will get you connected as well. We hope you've enjoyed today and that it's been valuable for you. That's how it's intended each and every week. We love you, California. We look forward to being back with you next time here at Your Financial Compass.